Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight,
every time our government acquires land for human settlements, honorable members, for these families, this group stands up to say very loudly, not in our neighborhood.
the government's attempts to house the poor are being frustrated by racists and bullies. Human Settlements Minister is my guest following her remarks during Parliament's sitting this afternoon. The Competition Commission launches a probe into what is happening in the fresh produce market. We bring you details of that. The spokesperson for the Competition Commission is my guest. That and more coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. It's one of South Africa's biggest problems, but has been relegated into relative obscurity by the bigger challenges of electricity, unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The latter three, in fact, being major contributors to the crisis. Now, according to the Minister of Human Settlements, it's not for lack of trying. Addressing a joint sitting of Parliament today during a debate on the President's State of the Nation address, Mamoloko Kubai said government efforts to tackle the country's housing backlog are being thwarted.
Requires land for human settlements, honorable members, for these families. This group stands up to say very loudly, not in our neighborhood.
Okay, the Human Settlement Minister joins us on the line from Cape Town, from where she made the remarks I spoke about earlier. Hopefully, we'll find the right clip in a minute to play. Minister, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo. Good evening to your viewers at home.
Your frustration was palpable.
Yeah, the matter, I think I just saw a bit of the clip of the way I'm explaining. There are quite a number of examples that we can give for you. Where when we purchase land as part of our program for developing human settlements to relocating people, this happened during the disasters where we identified land, and then in the process of us doing engineering services working, and then we have a group of people saying, not in our neighborhood. Similarly, here in Western Cape, it's a trend as well, where when you want to move people, then they start saying, not in our neighborhood. And the reason I'm flagging this to South Africans and say, we can't want to build one South Africa, where we are talking about a united South Africa and in our diversity. But we think that the poor must be relegated to the outskirts, far away from opportunities, and not closer to those of us who can afford, who are living in luxury. And majority of the time, Vuyo, you find that these people that are being denied even access to these housing opportunities that we want to provide, sometimes even end up as being those who work for some of us who have these opportunities. And the reason I'm flagging this particularly, we have an incident here in Cape Town. Honorable Nkondro yesterday spoke about. And we have people on the PRASA line. We're trying to relocate them out of that PRASA line so that the railway line can function and people in the city of Cape Town can be able to have access to a train, which is cheaper mode of transport. We've been identifying various pieces of land. And in that, you find that there's mobilization by those who can afford, threatening us with court. Some of them does go to court, and saying not in our neighborhood. They determine the type of houses that must be built to say, no, we don't want the TRUs, for example. Even when we say, okay, we're going to build RDP houses or BNT, they don't want. and they are wanting to determine to say next to us, this is who will live. Now, if you want to deal with the apartheid spatial development, you can't deal with it when you still want to segregate people on the basis of class and race. And this is part of the problem. So we do end up a lot in court. And then sometimes I've got to decide whether do I go the long route of court, where you spend a lot of money in court defending a case, or do you try and go and find another land somewhere so that you can faster provide a service?
Several issues from what you've just said, but I want us to quickly go back to that, to one clip, or one of the clips where, that gave rise to this conversation, where you were expressing the frustrations that you've just spoken about.
Integrate the poor and working class into urban communities have faced serious backlash and resistance. I'm speaking here, Mr. President, of a group in the urban reach that we call Not in My Neighborhood. Honorable Nkondlo spoke about. It is a challenge for us, led mainly, majority of the time in the wards, by DA councillors. These are well-resourced groups whose sole purpose is to ensure that the poor and the working class families remains in the outskirts of the cities. This group is motivated by mixture of racism and disdain for the poor and the working class. They regard the poor in the cities as refugees who must be rounded up and shipped back to the rural areas. Every time our government acquires land for human settlements, honorable members, for these families, this group stands up to say very loudly, not in our neighborhood. They utilize all sorts of tricks to resist, including courts, which causes delays in these families to receive shelter. The only crime these people, poor working class communities and families, have committed to receive this abominable treatment is that they are the descendant of the victims of apartheid and were born without any means. All freedom-loving South Africans, both black, white, colored, Indian, all races, all classes, needs to stand up against these bullies.
Now, when you approach these communities, or when you've identified these pieces of land which you believe are suitable for poor people, for the working class, and can indeed form part of these, of suburbia, for lack of a better description, do you go with them with something that says, we've looked at everything, this is what we could find, and it is for this, that, and the other reason that we've chosen this, and this is how we're going to integrate? In other words, it's a very comprehensive, a presentation, or you make a very comprehensive case in front of everybody.
No, definitely. We remember part of the issue around human settlements is that it's a bulk infrastructure. The more people are further, the more you'd have more cost in terms of putting water, electricity, and sanitation. Now, closer to where already living people or communities exist, it's better because you already connect to existing infrastructure, or you can just expand on it. Now, that's part of the issue why we would look for land closer to where already there are residential areas. Now you find that as you do that in processes of community engagements, that's where you'd find the councillors saying not in our neighborhood. And then you find sometimes even council themselves, for example, in metros, where they do not approve the plans from human settlements because they do not want, or they are being influenced by those who are saying not in our neighborhood. So the whole process then delays Vuyo. And it makes it just difficult. What we are raising here as human settlements and as government, and hence I'm calling for South Africans to assist, because when somebody mobilizes community, we are calling for saying freedom-loving South Africans in those communities at least must come out and say this is not right. We can't continue to have a segregation in terms of race, in terms of class in this country, how we live. It's not done anywhere. You go to many countries, you find integration. You hardly see who has and who doesn't. Now, in this country, you can determine by suburbs to be able to tell this is how much people are living or the worth of their income. Now, that's part of the problem. When we build integrated human settlements, you'd see, like we've tried to do in your Cosmos and other mega projects, that's what the ideal situation that we want. Bonded houses mixed with social housing where people can rent, but also for those who are also saying we have people who are just getting free houses, like your BNG, getting those as well. So that's the community we want to build going forward.
Now, to those who are raising objections, is there a way in which they then get an opportunity to reflect on what is being presented to them, raise their objections, and obviously you would, or the department or whoever would raise counter objections, try to find one another, and then at some point, then obviously a decision would have to be taken. But what I'm asking is, does the process cater for that kind of engagement, or provide for inputs from whoever may be concerned, whatever their motivation or reasons?
No, definitely we do. We go as far as we are even finding social facilitators, where we either find a company that specializes in engagement with communities, or we even go as far as finding NGOs in the communities, or sometimes even religious leaders who help us in the conversation. Part of the issue for me, Vuyo, is that I don't think as South Africans we process the issue around integrated human settlements, where all of us must be able to live side by side. By the way, I'll share one of the research, one of the developers shared with UN Habitat, for example, saying that in one of the projects, they took 2 years in consultation. Now, 2 years for you to somebody who is living in a shack where water comes in every year, every day when it's raining, when floods comes, and they are literally finding themselves with children on the streets, elderly women. It's too much. It's way, way too much.
Are there no provisions?
So that's why
Are there no provisions in law that take, that deal with those delays? People who may just be dragging these things on and on, often for nefarious reasons.
No, currently what happens is that you would have to do the consultation. And then once you do the consultation, which mainly based on the experience that we have, is that they will play along. They'll get into the consultation, they'll participate in the engagement, and you think that you are finding a solution. At the time you say, okay, we are now starting to implement, we are going to move, we think we've got everybody else, they will say no, but we are not going to agree. Now you find that the conversations are not making progress. It's that they are engaging to disagree. They are refusing to say, we do not want this type of a people in our area, we just want to stay by ourselves. And therefore, even if the land belongs to government, or it's a land that we can purchase as government, and we should be given that right to say, when we purchase it, and we say we're going to develop it for the following reason. I mean, somebody can make even as far as you're saying, no, if you bring these people who are not earning an income, they are going to steal from us. So prejudicing people to say, calling them thieves on the basis that they're poor. And those are some of the things that we encounter. Now, once they agree on that process, you have a determined time frame of engagements. What is finished is they drag it until the end, and then after that, then they take you to court. Now, on court, you can't determine to courts. You are dependent on courts to say they will hear the case when, if they have a backlog, then you are there forever. It can drag on and on while you're waiting for it. And hence, I'm saying you end up alternating to move away and finding another piece of land where sometimes even can be very far for communities to stay.
Okay, I hear the court part. So I want to go to the former, which is the process. Are you saying that even with the experience we've had over the years, we know exactly how the people who are well off play the game. We know very well the arguments that often get made and so on and so forth. I think even with that, have we not gotten to a point where you are able to tighten the laws a little, just to take into account? Of course, it's not a foolproof, way of, dealing with the problem, but have we at least tried to then temper with the laws such that, it's not as easy as it has perhaps been for people who object for all frivolous or racist or whatever reasons to do that?
You can temper to a certain extent, Vuyo. Remember public participation in policy making and decision making in communities.
But have we? What I'm trying to understand, Minister, is whether we have. In other words, when these problems were encountered and then, someone moved to try and close the gaps, but...
Look,
yes.
Yeah, Vuyo, it's a constitutional matter. It's a constitutional imperative for us to consult. So it's difficult not to consult. You cannot just not consult. But what we trying now to alternatively look, can we do declaratory orders upfront? And those are some of the things now that we're trying to look at. If we can upfront, while after consulting, go to court and say we have consulted, because provision of shelter is a constitutional obligation, especially for the indigent and poor. Can we get an agreement that this should not be stopped? Which currently, from a legal point of view, the team is saying you might not win it because the court will say you are anticipating something that has not happened. So it's navigating between the social issues, but also navigating within the legal framework, which is not an easy one. Hence, my approach, Vuyo, is to say, can we appeal to South Africans and understand the pressure that we have as government, but also the plight of those that we're trying to provide, and try and find each other middle way.
Let's go to the other issues then. You said aren't making your life any easy. One is you spoke about DA councillors. You're saying often mobilize these communities. But then at about the same time, you spoke about municipalities across the country that drag their feet, that don't process these applications on time, which to me, at least to an extent, nullify the first issue. Because if that's a problem you have countrywide, then you cannot just confine it or confine the problem to the issue of DA councillors, as an example.
No, it doesn't nullify it, Vuyo. We're giving examples of where the challenges, so we are accounting to the nation to say this is what we are doing and how we are doing it. Let me just make an example of the councils. We directly give grants as National Department of Human Settlements to metros. This is the Urban Development Grant, which we call it USDG. It's meant specifically for grants to upgrade infrastructure in those communities. And then we also give them informal settlement upgrading grant, which is mainly for upgrading of informal settlements. What has been the challenge with municipalities specifically, especially recently, and we have heard the president of SALGA speaking, addressing the joint sitting as well, reflecting on this. The instability, especially in areas where the coalition has become a sore point, where this week you have an MMC, you engage to say this is what you need to do to improve performance in the areas of work of human settlements. Next week, that MMC is not there. You have a mayor that must supposed to sign, you say, okay, you are not performing well. Can we improve on performance recovery? Then there is that issue. So we have multiple issues that we are dealing with in various programs that we run. So specifically on the land acquisition, it's the not in my neighborhood challenge. In the issue of the informal settlement upgrading, it's the planning side that we have a challenge of, that municipalities take time to approve, because mainly now we are seeing the instability. Yes, it could be capacity, but with capacity we are able to provide as National Department of Human Settlements, but also COGTA does, where there are technical shortcomings, we can be able to contract a specialist and send them directly to the municipalities to assist. But what we are finding now, the political instability, and as I said, President of SALCA spoke about this and requesting that, can we at least start seeing some legal framework that regulates the coalitions in local government. I called on this last year in one of the panels to say we need to have a legal framework for coalitions because they are becoming a soft point. That point I still emphasize because it has to be about the people, it has to be about service, not about the individuals that come in and out. But the problem is that you have one person you sit, you talk with, you explain what needs to be done. Next week, that person is not there. It's somebody else. You must allow them to adjust. And then they start their own processes. They don't approve plans. The municipalities don't agree because the coalition partners don't agree. Council meetings don't sit to approve plans, to approve budgets. And that is the matter that we have flagged as well to request COPTA to assist us in their intervention plan in the municipalities.
I get you on the coalitions one, and I mean this cuts across. I mean everyone has been complaining that the instability is really costing the ratepayers dearly, but also we must also accept that it is a fairly new phenomenon. In other words, it's not something that's been with us for a very long time. It doesn't have to be, to have been there for a long time, of course, for it to be a problem. But I want us to, park that one a little because the others, in my view, speak to long-standing issues that I think perhaps, at least to an extent, ought to have been resolved or dealt with. What I'm trying to understand, when you say, okay, we can't discount, or let's not put aside the issue of perhaps areas where that are governed by the opposition or other parties. But here's what I would want to then understand from you. In the areas where, for example, that are governed by, let's say, the ANC, all right, are you saying that you have less of that problem of the processing of these applications taking much longer than it actually should? In other words, things are smooth there.
No, not everywhere is smooth. That's why I made reference to metros. We only have one metro that the ANC is leading, which is Buffalo City. The difference there, where you have, for example, one not coalition, you do have some level of stability, and I agree with you, we can park that and just focus. Let's take, for example, we've got more than 2.6 informal settlements in the country, and I always say counting because they wake up and pop up. We're still trying to deal with the fact that informal settlements should not just pop up anywhere. We should start stopping them. But out of those, more than 40, I think around 45% are in various stages of upgrading that we are working on, more than 1.2 on various stages of upgrading, meaning that the municipalities have been able to give us township establishment. We are not able to do anything in the informal settlements until municipalities have said to us, we can develop in those because they've established them as township. But what we find, Vuyo, is that you find in municipalities within their bylaws, rightfully so, because I do not have a power to determine whether it's a municipality of the ANC or not. I do not have power as minister to determine how that council functions and how it takes its decision. So once they do not take a decision about that informal settlement, we are not able to do permanent structures, we are not able to develop it. We can only provide temporary services such as water tankering and toilets that are temporary. Now, those are some of the challenges that we face. So I'm trying to show you that when you go to various areas where we are implementing projects, you'll find different challenges that we face. So the Not In My Neighborhood has its own challenge. It's around land acquisition, and we have identified the source and the cause of it. We come to the municipal functioning, and then we understand where the problem is around issues of township establishment, but also around capacity, where we then capacitate the metros. And then you go in the issues around development of RDP houses. There you find, for example, you'll find challenges around project management or even contract discipline. I call it contract discipline because you find that a contractor starts work abandoned site because the project has become unviable. Either they took a lot of money and then they thought that they can do the project. They didn't manage their material because the margins are very low, and their employees. So it's various issues that we've now identified in the process of dealing with human settlements to say, why are we having delays in delivering of the service within the human settlements? And then we went into various areas to identify them. And today, because it was SONA, I would go into detail in my budget vote later this year, around May, when Parliament does that, in all the areas and account. What is it that we are doing? How far we have done? But I felt important to say, in a State of the Nation address, a matter that calls for all of us, because it's a national issue and it calls for national unity, all of us working together. Hence, I flagged the matter around not in my neighborhood, because it's a soft issue. If we all agree that it can stop, then it stops, and then we can be able to deliver service quickly. Then I can move into the other areas and deal with them, which are technical, which are more around contracting, project management, which we are also solving around those areas of work.
Before I let you go, I mean, there's another issue I'd have wanted us to explore, but we can't. We have run out of time. But the issue of it's a matter it's a big issue in education currently. It's a matter for you as well, and that's the missing middle. People who earn too much to qualify for fully subsidized homes, but do not earn enough to be able to source financing. What are you doing around that?
We are providing support in terms of grant for the missing middle. This is our space where we provide rental, and we also provide, it's almost like rent to own. So it's social housing programs. We build them across the country, and I made an example of some of those units that we're building across the country in all the provinces. For anyone, Vuyo, who wants, because we realizing that quite a number of people don't know that we provide this service. Anyone who earns between 5,000 and 22,000 qualify to apply for it previously was Flips, Help Me Buy a House. We're calling it first first home, that people can, it's for first time buyers who actually earn between 5,000 and 22,000. They can get a subsidized grant so that they can be able to own a home. This program, you go on the NHFC website, they will be able to get access to that information, and they can apply and benefit. So we do have that. We're rolling it out across the country. But even those who are in the urban areas are saying, I do not want to buy, but I want to rent. There is affordable rental space that we are doing. We'll be expanding on it. I've alluded to this in terms of this. Next week, Thursday, actually, I will be launching the program so that we can, all of us, know what it is, where you find it in terms of system application for the missing middle. So it's services that we're doing. We'll be looking into partnering with private sector for their own low income earners in the various sector. For example, in mining, we're engaging with them, looking at signing some of the MOUs. We're already engaging within government employee scheme to see if we can assist in rolling out housing subsidized to make sure that government employees also have, those who are earning less, can have access to affordable housing and have a decent shelter for themselves and their families.
Minister, let me thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much for you.
Minister of Human Settlements. She was talking in Parliament earlier, venting, really talking about her frustrations as the government seeks to provide housing for the poor, but also for the missing middle. After the break, the Competition Commission probes the fresh produce market amid concerns around the country's food security. Well, fear is rising that leaked footage of the murder of musician AKA might just hamper investigations. To discuss this further, we're joined by Mpumelelo Zikalala, a legal practitioner. Mpumelelo, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. I watching what people have been writing on social media, concerns expressed, fears raised, and so on, that the leaks aren't good or won't be good for this investigation. Of course, this is a matter not only for AKA, but I suppose or would imagine every other case of this nature.
Definitely it is. It is quite concerning that such crucial information will be looked out to the members of the public or for public consumption. Let's also remember that the contents of this investigation are going to be later used in the prosecution. Now, you don't want it to hamper the investigation so that they're able to find the correct and the appropriate perpetrators, but at the same time, you don't want it to be later disputed at a later stage during the prosecution stage. Maybe let's concentrate on these 4 individuals in which this particular evidence will then lead, or it's important that its integrity is protected at all times. Firstly, it's the police. Once the footage has been leaked, it's harder to investigate because you have indirectly alerted the perpetrators that you're on their trail. Secondly, the quality and the quantity of the evidence becomes a problem because you need to use it at a later stage. Now, if there are going to be too many hands and too many additions or possible changes that could have been made, it makes it a bit harder to later then use it at the end of the day during the trial stage. And it also speaks mostly about the capabilities of the police. One question that comes to mind for me is, how did that vital piece of information come about or be leaked to the members of the public? I would have expected at least screenshots of the individuals or the perpetrators rather than the whole video, which is very explicit and shows how the various acts actually took place. I don't think that particular video was supposed to come out. And then the perpetrator is also involved because it gives them the head start. They know that I've been identified, so then let me go to another country, making it difficult for the perpetrator to be caught at the end of the day. And even if they are caught, one of the things in which the legal practitioners are going to do is check the integrity of the video, check where it was taken, how it was stored, how it was brought to court, and how it has come about that it is now being used in this particular manner and fashion. And then second to last is the victims. You are seeing your loved one being shot. Surely it's going to do something to you. Secondly, it's going to cast doubt as to the capabilities of the policemen and whether they're able to do the job. Because you then think, if such a vital piece of information can be leaked out, then what other pieces of information is out there and what can be protected? And it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. But lastly, it's us as a community. You must remember that you do not want to indirectly abet and assist criminals by giving them a head start. There's something called obstructing and defeating the ends of justice, which is a criminal law crime. And also, under the cyber law crimes, it could be extended that if you press the share button during any social media interaction, you can be part and parcel of defeating the ends of justice or assisting someone.
Now, I can see or hear police saying, but it's not us. We are not responsible. Someone else is leaking these videos, not us. What are the chances? What's the possibility of people who wouldn't want this case to progress actually doing this deliberately, precisely, to defeat the ends of justice? But they'd be doing it, obviously, selfishly, because they'll be doing it so that the case collapses and the culprits are not caught.
In fact, there's a high chance of that taking place. However, the police have been given certain powers. The minute a particular incident has taken place, they take over the scene. That is what they are there to do, to come in and collect evidence. So if you go and say, I want to make sure that I collect this footage and it's going to stay with me in a particular hard drive. In fact, I don't even want snippets of it. I want the whole hard drive and where you're able to store it, because it must be then taken to various testing labs. And there must be a technician who's going to certify that it was really stored in a manner in which it could not be tampered. That's the way in which you conduct your investigations. So when an incident has taken place, it shouldn't be a crime scene which is going to be solved or that is going to end within a matter of 2 or 3 hours. That's the most crucial part in terms of searching or combing the particular crime scene with all the evidence, DNA, witness statements, footages that you can be able to take from the side of the police. So I think it's going to speak again to what are really our law enforcement agencies properly trained as to how to collect this particular information, how to protect it, how to make sure that you are able to say to certain individuals, because you are also under investigation or you are part and parcel of our witnesses, don't talk to anyone. And also from your community side, I think it's a matter of education and saying to them, these are the things that you are doing. This is the harm that you are causing, whether directly or indirectly. So stop what you are doing and let the law enforcement officers do their job.
So the law enforcement, agencies also won't have a leg to stand on, to the extent that they are also required to play their part. In other words, they ought to have made sure that they protected whatever evidence there may have been, so they won't get away with simply saying, throwing their hands in the air and saying it wasn't us. But you're also saying that those who press the share button, as you put it, won't get away with saying, I just got it from somewhere and I passed it on because I thought AKAs or Tibbs's friends, are interested in seeing what actually happened.
Definitely. You have the Cyber Crimes Act, which has been recently promulgated as a law, which then says you are responsible for whatever that you do within your social media platforms. And once you press the share button, you are then saying, I'm owning this particular material that I'm sharing. I'm going to take full responsibility as to what happens and what can happen at a later stage. In fact, Section 17 of that particular act, if I'm not mistaken, speaks about aiding and abetting a criminal activity, which is may be part and parcel, depending on how wide you want to interpret something like this, to make sure that, or to interpret it as if you have assisted someone in obstructing or defeating the ends of justice. So before you share, you must think about what's going to happen if at a later stage I'm assisting an individual, a perpetrator, to get away with it. But most importantly, let me think about the victim. Let me think about AKA's mother, for example. When she sees this particular footage, what is it that is going to happen to her? If it was me, would I want to view something like this a number of times? Or would I want his daughter to be able to have access to this type of information? So it's also a responsibility on us as members of the public to say, let's be responsible citizens.
And stop being the one or the first to distribute this stuff. Thank you very much. Mpumelo Rosgalal, legal practitioner, of course, enlightening us on those issues. So you have been warned, but also you're being urged to act responsibly. To this now, the Competition Commission has published the final terms of reference for an inquiry into the fresh produce market. For some background and why we should care, please welcome the Commission's Head of Communications, and that's Sipho Ngwema. Good evening, Mr. Ngwema. Please unmute. Yeah, we can hear you now. Give us a bit of background, Mr. Ngwema, if you will, to this probe. It's been, this matter has been in the making for more than a year or thereabout.
Yes, indeed. Last year, we went to the public, invited comments with regards to the terms of reference, because we wanted to interact with stakeholders, people who farmers, small farmers, people who are active players in the space, in order for us to be able to conduct this inquiry. We conduct an inquiry because we have concerns normally when we launch inquiries into markets. We have concerns that there may be features in that particular market which may distort, prevent, or even impede competition. And in this particular instance, the Competition Commission has been dealing with a number of cases, particularly since the advent of COVID, where we had to deal with about 250 cases, and about 700 of those were cases that related to essential foods. And many of the companies that were responsible for that price gouging were then prosecuted and fined. But also subsequent to that, we did a concentration report. The concentration report pointed to some features of over-concentration in the sector. For example, the big companies, farming companies in the sector, they make about 6.5% of the entire farming community. However, their income it's almost 2/3 of that, about 67% in that space. So we want to investigate whether or not those features and many others do not impede, do not distort, and do not prevent competition. Remember, agriculture is very key in the socio-economic welfare of the country, particularly when it comes to the poor. And we have seen prices that are way above inflation. And we want to understand what influences those prices from the moment the farmers input in terms of water, in terms of chemicals, but up to the product making its way to the shelves where you and I interact with. We want to investigate the entire value chain so that we can understand what influences these prices and whether or not indeed are there issues with regards to competition that make us unhappy or make us concerned with regards to the features that may distort competition, as I said.
From the views that have been expressed already, are there people who feel that along the value chain there are unscrupulous players? Have those allegations been made, even if they may not have been tested as yet?
Well, you must remember, we conducted an investigation with regards to fresh produce markets in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, and in Durban, and Pretoria, actually, where there were allegations that the agents, which are intermediaries, are very important role players in the value chain because, as I said, you have got input stage, you have got the production stage, where the farmers take these things to these fresh produce markets. And there were allegations there that there were barriers to entry that were being created, artificial barriers being created against small businesses, where the allegations were that there were artificial interventions which made the exercise of small farmers selling into these fresh produce markets futile, and therefore some of them left because in terms they did not make reasonable margins to stay in the business, and the system was favoring the big role players. Those investigations are still going. However, this one is much more broader than that. As I said, it's concentrating on also on the issues of concentration in the sector, but also the entire efficiency in the value chain. We're picking up three themes that we are going to investigate with regards to the terms of reference. The first one is the efficiency of the value chain, as I said, particularly when it comes to fresh produce, to look whether or not are there no features there which impede competition, but are there no features, as again, which may be blocking the small role players. And the second one is to look at the market dynamics in terms of key inputs and the impact of those into the produce. What in the value chain then informs the price that you and I pay when we buy these essential foods. And the third one, as I mentioned earlier, is with regards to a barrier to entry. We have noticed that since 1993, when there were 58,000 farmers, today, or in 2017, the last count was only 40,000 farmers, so meaning 18,000 farmers were lost in South Africa. But also we have seen that the production of certain key fresh produce essentials has dropped by huge percentages. So we want to understand what impact do those things have, and also how do they affect small farmers, how do they affect us as consumers, but importantly, in terms of our mandate, how do they affect fair competition in the sector?
Now, as things stand, are there no provisions within the sector is there no system for that ensures that there are some checks and balances? It may well be inadequate, as with other areas, of our economy where you found some really serious breaches and corruption and the like. But something that would give you a starting point, for lack of a better description. Is there anything like that in the system which says, hey guys, this is what we have that you can perhaps build upon? These are some of the problems that we've already identified, even if we may not have done anything about them.
Remember, they are key role players. Yes, indeed, they are systems in the sense that you have your key stakeholders. These groups then will form bodies that are supposed to do one check and balance or the other. You would have local government, for example, where these fresh produce markets belong to, and they're also supposed to have their own checks and balances in terms of fairness, in terms of assisting transformation, particularly in support of the small farmers who must be able to come in and play a key role. However, because you do not have sometimes very strong statutory bodies, particularly national level, who are entrusted with regulatory matters when it comes to these types of issues. So you would need to look into the entire value chain and see whether or not what is it that policy can do, whether there are policy interventions that can be done, what is it that the government can do in terms of the relevant government departments to assist the process. But at the end of the day, it's key, as I said earlier, because agriculture is key and you need to secure your food security. The number of issues now that are affecting food security, we've had reports that as time goes on, we are going to struggle with regards to issues of food security. And in terms of our own reports that we have been doing on a quarterly basis as the Commission, I said earlier that some of these prices, in terms of volatility, they are above the inflation that we should be expecting. And therefore, if they're above inflation, we need to be concerned. As I said, it affects largely the poor. So those are the things that we would want to look at so that when we then have findings, we're able to answer your question properly, whether or not do we have
where the gaps might be,
Are there things, excuse me?
I'm saying you'll be able to point out where the gaps might be.
Yes, indeed. We are going to have, at the end, when we're interacting with stakeholders, we're currently doing that. We are going to do that during the processes of public hearings. But in the end, we want to have findings, and those findings will be followed by recommendations. We will be looking at various issues that hopefully we are going to be able to detect as we do this this inquiry.
Sipangwema, let me thank you very much for your time this evening.
Always a pleasure, Vio. Thanks once again for having us.
Okay, he's the head of communications at the Competition Commission. They've launched that inquiry today. In fact, yesterday rather, they announced that they had finalized the terms of reference for that inquiry. SIPO, of course, telling us of the importance of this particular probe, because at the end of the day, it's about our own food security as a country. And that's our show for tonight. So join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.